If you'd like to gather around me, I think I'm going to be okay. Come on. Come on. Our Secret Service is worried about them. If we have to worry about them, we have big problems. Okay, do you want to have a tune and you want to do this? Watch what I do, and then I'm going to give you some pens, okay? You ready? What a nice picture this is, huh, Governor? You ready? We'll do a good job. Wait, let me press that. I want to make this a really good signature because this is, this is a big one, right? Oh, I think we have a 10. We have a 10.
God bless you, Mr. President.
Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Happy Girls and Women in Sports Day. And today is a good day because the executive order protecting women's sports, banning biological males from women's sports, has officially been signed by President Donald Trump. So it intends to keep biological men out of women's sports through Title IX, pressuring schools to comply with the mandate by threatening to pull federal funds. So any schools that allow males to compete in women's sports will not receive federal funding. The order will also mandate a visa review of athletes who enter the US to compete and mark the wrong sex on their application for potential fraud. A White House official said, on his first day in office, Joe Biden signed an executive order calling on schools across the country to allow students to compete in the sport of their gender identity. That is a slap in the face to the countless female athletes who dedicate tremendous effort to be the best in their sport, only to be forced to compete with biological men. Title IX passed in 1972, and it prohibits sex-based discrimination in any school or other education program that receives federal funding. The original purpose of Title IX has been restored. Now, the first question that came to mind when I heard about this executive order was, what is the NCAA going to do? Are they going to double down on their ridiculous policy that allows males to compete against female athletes? Or are they going to follow suit and fall in line with the rest of the country? Universities that receive federal funding are going to have to fall in line with this executive order if they want to continue to receive funding. Trump also said that he won't stand for schools that force girls to share locker rooms with males, to share spaces with males. He said he's not going to stand for that and he would withdraw federal funding under those circumstances. So is the NCAA going to continue to allow biological males to go into the women's locker room? So more than likely, I would think they have to fall in line eventually. And apparently, they've been discussing it ever since. They've been discussing the next course of action to take due to this executive order. So the NCAA doesn't receive direct federal funding, but because they're so intertwined with schools that do receive federal funding, schools that are in states that have banned male athletes competing against women, they're going to have to figure out what they're going to do. And it's a shame that it has to go all the way to the White House before their hand is finally forced, which I think is eventually going to be the outcome of all of this. Women who are forced to compete against biological men will also be allowed to sue schools, the White House official noted, saying that should very much concern would-be violators. So the VP of the NCAA has spoken to Fox News and confirmed that they are rethinking their policy due to this executive order. So this is absolutely huge. So this executive order may very well affect the source of this whole issue in the first place, one of the biggest sources of this problem, who allowed male athletes to compete in women's sports. Male athletes such as Lia Thomas. And this is why we have athletes such as Riley Gaines, Peyton McNabb, both of whom were right there when President Trump signed his executive order.
Good job. Looks like a good athlete to me. In high school, Peyton was a rock star athlete preparing for a future in college sports, but in one volleyball match, a much taller and stronger male spiked the ball right in her face, knocking her unconscious, partially paralyzing her right side and leaving her with a traumatic brain injury. And Peyton said it was 100% avoidable if only my rights as a female athlete had been more important than a man's feelings, and we can't let it happen, and it's not going to happen.
So the NCAA is already bracing for a potential change to its current rules that allow trans athletes to compete with women. Vice President of the NCAA's Eligibility Center, Felicia Martin, spoke at a congressional briefing in Washington on Wednesday to celebrate National Girls and Women in Sports Day, and suggested that the NCAA Board of Governors is already discussing potential policy changes once Trump's executive order goes into effect. She said, "We know that this is an issue and a national conversation happening around participation. The Board of Governors is right now having conversations about what potential next steps might be. But this is absolutely one of those issues that is ongoing. But without a national standard that can be applied across the board, all of us are making decisions based on what we think is the best for student athletes and opportunities. There is a national standard that was decided on the day of the election. The majority of people in this country are not for male athletes competing against women." Martin added that she expects more clarity on a national standard later in the day from Trump. She also said that the Board of Governors would make its decision on any policy changes based on the specific details of the executive order. I'm so annoyed with them acting like it needs to be spelled out for them. Just use your head. They know what to do. For once, do the right thing. You don't need it to be spelled out. You don't need it in black and white written for you. And it already has been spelled out for you anyway. I don't know what they're waiting for. In addition to Trump's executive order, the NCAA may get even more clarity on an incoming federal standard if the Protection of Women and Girls in Sports Act passes through Congress. The bill, which would ban federal funding for any institution that allows trans athletes in girls and women's sports, has already made it through the House of Representatives. So this policy has been there since 2010. The 2010 policy on transgender student athlete participation states that biologically male athletes are allowed to compete in the women's category after undergoing at least 1 year of testosterone suppression treatment. And then, obviously, that led to the likes of Lia Thomas or William Thomas. That led to the ordeal that these female athletes had to go through in the locker room. Absolutely appalling, because there was a push to normalize this. We started seeing more examples of this happening. This policy has allowed them to pass the buck, has allowed them to plead ignorance. We need it spelled out for us before we can be bothered to update our policy and get in line with the times. That's actually a good thing these days, getting in line with the times. So Lia Thomas took a 2022 national championship from a female athlete. So the NCAA are embroiled in several lawsuits at the moment. Another lawsuit was filed on Tuesday evening when 3 of Thomas's former UPenn teammates came forward with their own experiences of having to share a team and locker room with Thomas and were allegedly gaslit by their university administrators and fed pro-trans ideology. I remember the President Charlie Barker had the nerve to suggest that the female athletes could go elsewhere, make alternative arrangements if they were uncomfortable with sharing a locker room with a male athlete.
Why do your guidelines allow biological men into women's locker rooms without the women's consent, without the women's foreknowledge? Why do you do that?
That's not what our guidelines say.
They do say that. I've got them right here. Your guidelines say that transgender student athletes should be able to use the locker room, shower, and toilet facilities in accordance with their gender identity.
And
here they are, right here.
And then everybody else should have an opportunity to use other facilities if they wish to do so.
Okay, so the burden's on the women.
So there's something amiss when it comes to the core values of this organization, if you ask me. Very much something wrong with their core values when they think this is okay, when they think it's okay to gaslight women, tell the female athletes that they can go elsewhere if they have a problem with it, make them feel like there's something wrong with them. But this is a good day. The country has spoken, the president has spoken, the executive order has been signed, and the NCAA better fall in line if it doesn't want more lawsuits. It's as simple as that. I'm going to leave it there. I encourage the NCAA to do the right thing before they embarrass themselves any further, before they compromise the integrity of their organization any further and lose all credibility. So a recent New York Times survey found that the vast majority of Americans, including a majority of Democrats, don't think transgender athletes should be permitted to compete in women's sports. Of the 2,128 people who polled, 79% said biological males who identify as women should not be allowed to participate in women's sports. Of the 1,025 people who identified as Democrats or leaning Democrat, 67% said transgender athletes should not be allowed to compete with women. And Macy Petty, referring to the NCAA, she had this to say: "It's sad the NCAA lacks the integrity and moral clarity to protect their female athletes on their own. But I'm grateful the American people elected a man who was clear on his promises. He's getting men out of women's sports."
This is so exciting. I mean, but the biggest thing that I'm thinking to myself is the fact that we even have to do this and spend time and sign an executive order to say something as common sense as men do not belong in women's sports. But this is just the beginning. Ultimately, this issue will not be over until we get this passed in all three branches of government, until we see cases won in the Supreme Court, until we see that Congress pass this. And so we're looking for the Senate to hopefully try and pass this into law as well after Trump signs this executive order.
I know you've talked to Congress. What are the chances of that?
I don't know, but honestly, I want them to bring it because we need these senators on the record saying that they do not stand with women, because there's a lot of Democrats that are not going to vote for this, and we want them on the record saying that they believe men belong in women's sports. And I think that is very important. So I really do hope that they bring this up in Senate and we see how people are going to vote on this.
Today is National Girls and Women's Sports Day. We're celebrating female athletes like yourself. What did that sport do for you? What did swimming do for your life?
Absolutely. I mean, it made me everything that I am today. It taught me time management. It taught me how to be part of a team. It taught me how to work towards a goal and achieve. I wouldn't be the person I am right here talking to you right now if I hadn't had swimming growing up. And to think of any girl being robbed of that opportunity because a male athlete wants to take her spot or compete in her sport or bump her off the roster is heartbreaking. And that's ultimately why it is so important that we all stand up for this.
Do you feel that there are more people willing to say something? I mean, I've just been dismayed by how few women who are now in retirement, who had all the opportunities afforded to them, that don't say anything.
You know what? It's a really great point, and I say this all the time. There's not a single high-level professional athlete or Olympic-level athlete that has spoken out or coach. So we have a long way to go. It's amazing. Like I said, Trump has, opened the door for us, but I think it's also important to remember private institutions won't be impacted by this. The Boston Marathon this April has a man running in the women's category. That's privately run.
That's crazy.
It is crazy. The International Olympic Committee, we saw a man win in the women's boxing ring this summer. That's an international organization, not impacted. We, the people, have to now take the baton that he has passed to us, and we need to get the 70 to 80% of Americans who agree with us to stand up, because you're right. It still feels pretty lonely out here.
So everybody who has supported female athletes, supported them against this insanity, spoken out, even worn a t-shirt, spoken to their family members, wherever, those people can be very proud of themselves. Something tells me that the people who have been afraid to speak out all this time, high-profile people, for example, something tells me that they may feel they can speak out now, because what are you afraid of? Majority of people in this country have spoken loud and clear.
So the first I heard about this ad was because J.K. Rowling, of the Harry Potter series fame, of course, she tweeted this: "In years to come, a great question to ask self-proclaimed liberal men will be, which side were you on, women's rights or men's demands?"
But it is pretty shocking what she said there. about the high-level female athletes who have remained silent and even spoken out against female athletes, saying that they're bigots if they're not for this. So if you want to be on the wrong side of history, that's up to you. But private organizations, international organizations, they're still going to be able to do what they're going to do. However, Trump has said that he is going to make it clear to the IOC that America is not for males competing in women's categories. America is not for that. And we know that the next Olympics is going to be right here. And he has also said that the likes of, the women's boxing, when it came to male athletes taking gold medals, he said that's going to come to an end. And I love the fact that male athletes who want to travel here to compete in the Olympics, they're not going to be granted visas if they want to compete in the women's category. You can't even travel here. So let me know what you think. Thanks for watching. Like, comment and subscribe. Take care of yourselves, and God willing, I will see you in the next video.